Deadwood is the name of my N-scale model railway set in Western Canada. Deadwood 2 carries on from the first Deadwood movie presented at the last Engage Forum virtual exhibition held a year ago. Deadwood 2 will feature the Canadian, an iconic transcontinental passenger train service that passes through my fictitious Deadwood. My presentation will include some brief background on the real Canadian, followed by the running of my model train. The Canadian comprises a set of trains that run back and forth twice a week each way between Vancouver and Toronto, a distance of over 4,400 kilometers. The red line on the map shows the route as it is today. It was built originally as a journey of 3.5 days, but since the train was usually 12 hours late because freight trains wanted to use the same tracks, the official scheduled journey time was up to 4 days. Problem solved. The Canadian was initiated by the Canadian Pacific Railway in 1955. It was taken over in 1978 by Via Rail, a Crown corporation who still operate it today. The feature of the Canadian was its use of lightweight stainless steel coaches of the type being introduced in the United States on some of its famous long-distance trains. Following the US lead, the CPR also incorporated the new dome observation cars. After several refurbishments over the years, most of the original coaches are still being used. I've been on the Canadian twice, once in 2013 and again in 2015, both times traveling from Vancouver to Toronto. The collage shows a few of the photos I took on the trips. The first photo shows the Canadian halted at Jasper, Alberta, and provides a view of its 2 locomotives. My favorite spot on the train was sitting in the observation dome car at the train's end, and either up top in the dome or in the lounge downstairs. The first 2 pictures on the bottom row show the view from the dome, and in the third we're in the lounge downstairs. My model Canadian represents the train as it has appeared since 2009. 14 coaches are hauled by 2 F40 PH locomotives of 3,200 horsepower each in full size. The real Canadian would be comprised of anywhere between 10 to more than 20 coaches, depending upon the season. Deadwood layout takes the approximate shape of a horseshoe extending along 3 sides of a train room. The layout is a bit more than 3 meters from sidewall to sidewall and is of similar depth. The track followed by my Canadian is shown in red. It emerges from behind the barrier hiding the train storage area along the right-hand side of the layout, proceeds along the layout's outside in a counterclockwise direction, and then returns along its inside in a clockwise direction before passing through Deadwood town and finally disappearing behind the barrier at the bottom right. Here the Canadian chugs up an incline after it emerges from behind the train storage screen. The 2 F40 PH locomotives haul a train comprised of 1 baggage dormitory car with sleeping quarters for the crew, 3 economy class coaches, and a dining car which includes a galley. 6 sleeping cars contain a mixture of fold-down beds, 1-person roomettes, and 2-person cabins. There are 2 mid-train dome cars, each with a cafe and a lounge, and 1 dome car at the train end, which also contains a lounge, a bar, and 2 sleeper cabins. The train passes John McDonald Sr.'s farm on its right. His wife Flora is renowned for making the best pumpkin pies in the world. Some of her pumpkins are watching the train go by from under the fence overlooking the railway track. The Canadian rolls into the scenic mountainous section of the layout, representing the Shuswap region in south-central British Columbia. After passing through a tunnel built through Wolverton Mountain in 1899, the train skirts Lake Lafroig, traverses a second tunnel through Mount Paraphernalia, before passing onto the bridge crossing Lake Lafroig. Lake Lafroig was named after the fine Scotch whisky from the island of Islay in Scotland. The lake is known by the locals as Frog Lake, which is often shortened to the Frog. The Frog is an aquatic playground for the local citizens and tourists. Some canoeists are seen enjoying a sun-calm day on the Frog. Swimming, sailing, water skiing, and fishing are also popular lake activities. After crossing the Frog, the Canadian wends its way through woods of Douglas fir and ponderosa pine trees below Wolverton Mountain, back to the less mountainous part of the layout. Next, we will ride in the observation lounge at the train end for an on-train view of things. This is a pretty good spot to ride the train, not the least because the bar is handy. We repeat the journey through the same mountainous section of the layout shown in the previous footage. After snaking its way around Wolverton Mountain, our train enters the Mount Paraphernalia Tunnel. Dark in here, but lights will be back on shortly. On our right, we pass an interesting geological feature known as the doorknob. The shear-swept rocks you can see are mostly ancient metamorphic rocks formed when both igneous and sedimentary rocks were subjected to high pressure and heat 2 billion years ago. Our train crosses the bridge over Lake Lefroy. Shortly, we will meet Route 67, the main highway into Deadwood from the northwest, where our on-train view ends. Near the road crossing, just to the right of the trees, are 4 young mooners waiting to greet us, showing their better faces. Our engine driver signals hello in return. A recent industrial development in the Deadwood area has been the construction of the Webbo micro-petroleum refinery, which the train now passes. The refinery is the brainchild of an Australian entrepreneur and produces boutique petroleum products, including its trademark Tiger Gas, a super high octane gasoline. The Deadwood location gives the refinery access to the railway line necessary for transporting crude oil in and its products out. Deadwood Municipal Council gave the facility very favorable tax treatment, which had nothing to do with each councillor being provided with a first-class holiday anywhere in the world and a case of the finest Scotch whisky prior to the signing of the agreement. After passing the refinery and rounding the corner at the top right of the layout, the Canadian approaches Deadwood Station on the outskirts of town. Deadwood isn't big enough for the Canadian to stop, but the town is served by the Dayliner, a rail diesel car service, which so happens to be at the platform as our train rolls through. The station building dates from 1914 and was constructed according to a standard Canadian Pacific Railway design at the time. A century ago, there were a number of daily passenger services stopping here every day in both directions, but now the Dayliner completes only one round trip a day, stopping at Deadwood once in the morning and again on its return journey later in the afternoon. Another view of the Canadian passing through Deadwood Station and then proceeding across Main Street. In the foreground, on the other side of the track, is the recently opened Deadwood Municipal Pool, which is being patronized by 3 Swedish tourists who have just driven up in a VW camper van. Magnus, Elizabeth, and Matilda didn't see the need to wear swimsuits, causing an instant clearance of the pool by the conservative locals. This trio remained unfazed by the passing passenger train. Yet another view of the Canadian passing through Deadwood. This time we look up Main Street as the train goes by. Some people are annoyed by having to wait for trains at level crossings, but I love them. This crossing is a regular site of car-train collisions as the time between the warning bell first sounding and the train arriving is a bit tight. No one has ever been injured, luckily, but these collisions do provide a regular supply of scrap for Nat's Metal Salvage, a thriving Deadwood business. We say goodbye to the Canadian as it heads eastward towards Toronto, back behind this train storage screen. This particular train will be back this way in about a week's time. Whoa, what's this? Deadwood has a surprise visitor. The space-time warp that caused the unexpected appearance of the Santa Fe Super Chief a year ago manifests itself once again. This time we have a passenger express hauled by the A4 Commonwealth of Australia, temporarily transported from its normal run between Aberdeen and Edinburgh in the 1950s to the Deadwood region half a century later. You have to wonder what the train passengers must be thinking. The express crosses the Frog. The scenery is certainly not what the passengers are expecting on the Aberdeen to Edinburgh run. As the train rolls through Deadwood Station, its passage causes much delight amongst the local train spotters, especially those of British origin. Our Swedish tourists in the swimming pool pay absolutely no notice of this strange event. Much to the relief of the passengers, the Express is about to return to Scotland in its own time. I come to the end of my presentation of Deadwood 2. Thank you for watching. This has been a production of Webbo Cinematic Corporation at its Deadwood Studios in Deadwood, British Columbia.